Hey, what's up guys, how's it going? Welcome to Build Your Own Blog series. In the previous video we have learned about static site generation, why it is useful, and also how our app will work. So in today's video we're gonna learn about MDX, we're gonna learn about some database concepts, we're gonna set up our database, and also we're gonna make our homepage static. We're gonna cover a lot of things today. But before we get started, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. And without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so first of all, we are going to learn about MDX. Now what is MDX? MDX is just Markdown with JSX. Basically, it is just Markdown, but you can combine JavaScript with it. For example, you can write your normal Markdown there, then you can also write JavaScript logics, you can create variable, create functions, execute functions, and things like that. But the most special thing about MDX is the custom components. You can use custom components in your Markdown directly. There are two ways you can do this. You can directly import the component in your MDX file, or use the custom component in your Markdown file, or I should say MDX file. Then later you can specify what component that is. Okay, so simply that is the concept behind MDX. So let's create our first blog with MDX. So inside the source directory, I'm going to create another directory. I will call it blogs. And inside the blogs directory, we're going to create our MDX files for blogs. So I'm going to create a file. Now the file name of these blogs are going to be a little bit different, or I should say special, because those file names will be used as slug. Basically, a slug is just a dynamic part of a dynamic route. So let me give you an example. So this is my website, qscoding.space, and this is a specific blog. If you see the URL, there is the main domain, then the /blog, then a specific text that is used just for this blog. And this is what we call a slug, or you can say a dynamic part of the URL. The /blog part will be always same for all of the blogs, but rest of the text of a URL will be dynamic and will be specific to that blog. And please make sure the slug name is all lowercase, and instead of space, we're gonna use dash. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but it's the common convention. So I will call it my -first -blog, and you have to give the extension, which is .mdx. So here we're gonna write all of our content. Now from the previous video, if you have seen it, if you haven't, please watch it. So in the previous video, we have learned that our blog file will contain two types of data. One will be the front metadata, and the second one will be the actual content for our blog. And to parse the front metadata, we're going to use a package called gray matter. So this is the gray matter GitHub page. If I scroll down, they have a demo. The way we write front metadata is like this. We put 3- on the top and 3- on the bottom. Then we put data in key value pairs like title, hello, then slug, home. And after these 3 dashes, we write our actual blog content. After parsing the whole Markdown file, we will pass that to our gray matter function. Then it will return us this result, which will have a content property, which will be a string actually, the actual blog content. Then we have a data object, and that object will actually contain the front matter as an JavaScript object. We're gonna put both the content and this front matter data object to our database. Alright, so this is how it works. Let's write some real front matter data. So let's add 3- and again 3-. Now we're gonna add a title. Title will be my first blog, and we will add a description, and the description will be this is my first blog. Then we're gonna add a banner property. Now the banner will be the path to the banner image. Now I like to store all of my images in the public directory. So in the public directory, I will create another directory. I will call it blogs, And inside the blogs, we're gonna create a separate directory for each of the blog, and we will store all of the necessary images for that blog in that directory. So let's create a directory, and your directory name should be same as the slug name. So I will again call it my -first -blog. And inside this directory, I like to store an image. I call it banner.png. It doesn't have to be, but I like to do that. So I will copy this demo image and I'll paste it here. And I will rename it to banner.png. And now in the blog, I will add the path of my banner. So it will be /blogs. Remember, we have to use the path relative to the public directory. So after /blogs / the slug name, which was my -first -blog, then banner.png. After that, we're gonna add another property, alt text, and this will be for the alternative text for our image component, the Nextjs image component. Again, I will simply call it my first blog. Then we're gonna add property, I will call it custom ID. And the custom ID will be an unique ID to a specific blog. Now, why do we need a custom ID? Because we need to make sure that this blog is unique. And also we will use this custom ID to make sure we don't create multiple documents in our database. Now, how do you get a custom ID? Well, there are plenty of tools available on the internet that will give you some random unique ID. One of the website is UUID generator. It will give you some random ID every time you refresh the page, or you can also generate. So it has generated us an ID, so I'm gonna copy it and I will paste it here. And this will make sure that this blog is unique. So now that we have added this metadata, now we can add any kind of markdown content for our blog. So I'm just gonna paste some markdown content here. Okay, so I have added some random markdown data. We have added all of the headings, we have added code blocks, then inline codes, then header with a link, a normal link, then images, and unordered list. Okay, so that's it for the markdown content, and I haven't added any kind of custom components right now. We're gonna handle them after 2 videos when we will style our blog page, because if we just put our custom components here, it will throw us error. So that's why we are not going to add any custom components for now. So now that we have our blog content, now we can work on our database. But before we work on our database, we need to understand some concept about database. Concept about MongoDB. So if you have experience with MongoDB or you know the basics of MongoDB, you can skip this part. I will put the timestamps. So let's understand the database concepts. So we are going to use MongoDB as our database. MongoDB is a NoSQL database. But what does NoSQL means? In NoSQL databases, we store values in key value pairs. For example, name here is the key and Anjan Shamoda is the value. And if you are familiar with JSON, you say that this is JSON. Actually, it's kind of like JSON, but MongoDB uses something called BSON, which is similar to JSON, but BSON accepts much more data type than JSON. So you can use data types like string, numbers, booleans, objects, arrays, dates, and so many other things. You can have a plain object or an array, but you can also nest one data type in another. For example, you can have an object inside another object, or you can have an array of objects which will contain more objects. So you can nest data in many levels, and each of this whole data is called a document. For example, here is only one user data, and this is called just a single document. And when you combine a lot of documents, you get a collection. And a database is simply a collection of collection. So this is how MongoDB stores data. And another important thing about MongoDB is that it is schema-less. But what is schema? A schema is just a structural representation of a document. Within a schema, you can specify what fields should be included in a document and what data type will be accepted for which field. And with the schema, you can create a model. A model is just a representation of a collection. Suppose you have 10 user documents, and if you combine all of this user document, you get a user collection, and you can create a user model with the user collection. That's what simply a model is. And model is created with a schema. But I have told you that MongoDB is schema-less. Then how do you even use schema? Well, we have to use an ORM for that. We are going to use Mongoose. Mongoose is an ORM for MongoDB. Basically, an ORM, you can think of it like an abstraction over vanilla MongoDB SDK. It allows you to create schemas, models, and also it gives you much more flexibility and much more features than vanilla MongoDB SDK. So these are some basic database concepts that I wanted to explain. So now we can set up our MongoDB database on MongoDB Atlas. So if you just go to cloud.mongodb.com, it will redirect you to this login page, and I will put the link on the description. So now you have to create an account if you don't have any, or you can log in with your Google account, which I'm going to do. Now after you have logged in with your account, it will ask you to create a new organization if it's a brand new account. So if there isn't any organization, just create a new organization with this button. I have 3 organizations. I will go to this one, and under organization you can create multiple projects. So we're gonna create a new project. Let's name it Kills Blog -YT. So next, and I don't want any other member, so create project. Now it will ask you to create a database, so let's create one. Now it will give you the pricing. We're gonna go for free. Now choose your cloud provider and the region, then go to the cluster name. You can rename your cluster, but it's only one time. Once you have created your cluster, you cannot change it. So I will call it blogs. So let's create. Okay, so it is building our cluster. We have to create a new user for the database. I will give my name, and also I will give a super secure password. So let's create a user. Okay, so user is created. You have to put an IP address. I will choose the add my current IP address, but it will not work. We have to change it. For now, let's click on finish. And now let's go to the databases. Alright, so now they are creating our cluster. It will take some minutes. Alright, so our database is ready. Let's click on browse collections. And let's click on add my own data. And let's create really our database. Remember, our database is just a collection of collection. So again, I will call it blogs, and the collection name I will call it test for now. And let's click on create, and the database is created. And now let's go to the network access, and we need to edit the IP address. So click on allow access from anywhere, and let's click confirm. And again, let's go to the database, and let's click on connect, and let's click on connect your application. Make sure your driver is Node.js and it is the latest version, and this is our connection string. This string will be used to make a connection between our application and this database. But to work with the database, we need to install the Mongoose package. So let's install that. So just type yarn add mongoose, and we need to install only this package. Alright, so Mongoose is installed, so let's open up our application. Now inside the source directory, I will create another directory. I will call it Mongoose. And inside the Mongoose directory, I will create another file. I will call it connectdb.js. And here I'm just gonna paste some code. So this is the code that we need. This code will be responsible to connect our database with our application. Basically, we are getting an environment variable called MongoURI, which we haven't created yet, but we will. If that doesn't exist, we're gonna throw an error. Then we are just creating a function called dbconnect, and this dbconnect will be asynchronous function. This function will connect our application with the database. But before that, we need to add that environment variable. To create an environment variable in Nextjs, we have to create another file which will be called .env.local, and it is a dot file, that's why it will be hidden. Let's open that up. And here we're gonna add that environment variable. I will just copy the name. And it doesn't have to be MongoURI, it can be anything, but the common convention for an environment variable name is it will be all uppercase, and instead of spaces, you have to use an underscore. Then give an equal sign, then the value, which will be our connection string, this one. So we will copy this, and I will paste it here. Now we have to change the connection string. We have to add our password. So we will remove this, and by password I doesn't mean that your MongoDB account password, the password for your database. So I will write that super secure password, and don't worry, I will change the password after this video. And here we have a placeholder, my first database. We will remove that, and we will add the database that we have created, which is blogs. So let's just save the file. So let's check if our application can be connected with MongoDB or not. So let's open up the index.js file, and from here we are going to export that getStaticProps function that we have discussed in the previous video. So export const getStaticProps. It will be async. And I will import the dbconnect function from the connectdb file. So import connectdb from mongoose/connectdb, and let's call the connectdb function connectdb, and we also have to await this. And if our application gets connected with our database, it will console log connected to MongoDB. So let's save the file, and let's run the dev server. Alright, so we have an error that getStaticProps function did not return an object. Yes, that was a stupid mistake. We're going to return an object, and inside the object there will be a props object, and that should fix the error. So here is our home page. Here on the console you can see that connected to DB is printed out. So our application has successfully connected to the MongoDB database. Now finally we can create the models for our database. So let's create another directory in the Mongoose directory. I will call it models, and inside the models directory I will create a file for the model, which is blog.js. So here we're going to create our model. So first we need to import the mongoose from mongoose, and we will also import two other things. We're going to import the schema constructor and the model function. So let's create our schema. So const schema will be a new schema, and it will be an object. Now we need different properties. We need title, which will be an object. We have to give the type, which will be string. Make sure the S in the string is capital letter. and it can be null, so required is true. Then we need description. Again, it will be type string and required. So I'm going to create a separate object. So const string required. I will cut this object and I will paste it here. So every time any field will be type string and required true, we're going to pass the string required variable. So string required, and it will also be string required. Then we need a slug field. Again, string required. Then content, string required. Banner, string required. Alt text, again string required. Reading time, then custom ID, and finally we have to add a created@. field. Now this created@ field will store a date when the blog was published, so it will be type date. So we need to add a default property, which will be date.now. Then the last one, which will be total views. This will be used for creating a view counter. Type will be number. And also we have to add a default, and it will be 0. And now we need to create a model and export that. So export default, we need to call the model function, and the first argument will be the model name. I will call it blog, and we have to pass the schema. We also need to check if the blog model already exists or not. If that exists, we need to export that model instead of creating a new one, and it is very easy to check. So mongoose.models dot the model name, which is blog. If that exists, we will export that, or we're going to create a new model and export that one. Okay, so that's it for our model file. Now we need to create a utils directory to create two utility functions, which will be used to read the blog file names and also their content. So I'll create another directory, utils, and here I'm going to create another file. I will call it get file names.js, and here we need to import two modules from Node.js. Import fs from fs. Fs stands for file system. Then we need to import the path module from path. Now fs and path both are core node modules, so we don't need to install anything. And now we need to get the root path of our project, and that's pretty easy to do. So const root, we need to call the cwd method from process. So process.cwd, it will give us the root path of our project, and we need to create a function. I'll call it get file names. Now we're gonna read the blogs directory inside the source folder, and inside the blogs directory we will have our MDX files. So the get file names should return us an array of file names. So we need to read that blogs directory. So fs.read dir sync, and it will take the path of our directory. Now you can simply just pass a string and give the path, but that is not recommended. Here is why. I'm on a Linux distribution, and in Unix system paths are like this: source, then blogs, and then other directories. So we use /, but if you are on Windows, instead of // they use \. So it will work fine in Unix systems like macOS or Linux, but it will not work on Windows. So we have to use the path module. If we use the path module, it will handle that thing for us. So we're gonna call the join method from path. So path.join. And the path.join can take many arguments. So first it will be root. Then from the root we need to connect src. Then we need to connect the blocks directory. So path.join will add these words and create a new path for us. And finally we have to export that function. Get file names. Get file names. And now we need to create another utility function. I will call it read blog files.js. Again, I will import these two modules. And also I need to get the root path. Now I will create another function, read blog files. It will take an argument. I will call it file name. And again, we have to use the fs module and we have to call the read file sync. Again, we have to give the path. We are going to use path.join. So again, pass the root, then src, then blogs, and then the file name. And for the second argument of the read file sync function, we're gonna pass utf8, and again export default read block files. Alright, so we have created our utility functions. Let's go to the index.js file of the pages directory, obviously, and let's import those functions. So import get file names from utils/get file names, and again import read block files from utils/read block files. So let's go to the get static props function, and we need to get all of the block file names. So const file names, and let's call get file names. So file names will be an array of strings. Actually, let's just console log file names to see what we are doing. We are getting an error, import fs cannot resolved. Okay, so I understand. It is because of this line, the read block files function. We haven't used it, so I'm gonna comment it out. Now it should work. Alright, so we have an array of string, and the string is the file name myfirstblog.mdx. So get file names function is working. Now we need to parse the data using the file names, and now we need to loop over these file names. So file names.map, and we have to pass an function. File name will be the first parameter, and now we need to get the slug from the file name. So const slug, and we remove the .mdx extension from the file name. So file name dot replace, we want to replace .mdx, and we want to replace with an empty string. This will remove the extension. And now we need to parse our files. So I'm just going to uncomment this line, and I will create a variable const parsed file, and we need to call the read block files, and we need to pass the file name. So let's just console log parsed file, and I will delete the file names console log. And you can see the content of that markdown file is printed out on the console. And now we need to use the front matter package to get our metadata and the actual content. So I'm gonna kill the server, And let's install gray matter, yarn add gray matter. Alright, so gray matter is installed. Let's run the server again, yarn dev. And now let's import gray matter. So import, I will call it matter from gray matter. And let's call the matter function matter and pass the parsed file, which will return us an object, and I'm gonna destructure that object. It will give us the data object, which will contain the matter data and the content. And I will just console log the data and content, data and content. And here is our content string, and if I scroll up, we have this data object, exactly what we wanted. And now we need to get the reading time from this content. Actually, I forgot to install that too. So yarn add reading time. Alright, so reading time is installed. And let's import reading time. Import reading time from reading time. And let's call the reading time function. And I will pass the content. It will give us an object which will have a property called text. And we need to add that to our data object. I will cut this line from here and I'll paste it here. So data dot reading time will be reading time, and we will also add the slug. So data dot slug will be slug, and we will also append the content to our data. So data dot content will be equals to content. We are doing this because we want an array of objects. That object will contain every data. And finally, we know that from the map function we have to return something. We're going to return the data. And I will delete this console log. And let's store the return array from the map function. So const parsed data. And let's console log parsed data. And let's run the server. Alright, so we have an array of objects, and that object is containing all of the necessary data for the blog. And also it has a reading time property which says 1 minute read. And now we need to take our data and add them to our database. Now in MongoDB database you can add new data or you can update existing data. We're gonna update the data. We're not really gonna add new data. Let me explain why. Now when you will build the application, this function will get run. We will organize our blog data and then we will add them to our database. Next time when you will build the application, the same process will happen again, but we already have our blogs in our database. Why would you ever add again? So every time you will build the application, this function will run and we will have new documents. And that's not what we want. We want to update our existing document with our updated data. Maybe you have changed the slug, maybe you have changed the content. We always want to update the data, not add new document. We will add new document only if the blog document that we are looking for doesn't exist. I hope that makes sense. So there's a thing called bulk update in MongoDB. For example, if you have 10 blogs, if you update them one by one, then you have to send 10 requests to the database. And that's not a good way of doing things. So what you can do, you can specify an array of updates that you want to make in the database with a single request. And that's what we call the bulk update. So we need to create an array for that. So const blog bulk update array. and we're gonna loop over the parsed data. Actually, I should call it all parsed data, all parsed data, and I will loop over the all parsed data array, all parsed data dot map, and the first parameter will be blog, and we are going to return an object. It will have an update1 property. Update1 will only update one document, and we need to filter it by the custom ID. So custom ID will be blog.custom ID, and we want to update the data. We have to use an operator called set, and the data that you pass here will be updated. So we're gonna update the whole document. So we're just gonna pass blog, and then we have to add two more properties. These are important. We're gonna pass an absurd property, which will be true. That means if any of the document, we are finding a document using the custom ID. If any document doesn't exist, that means it's a new blog. So we are gonna create a new document for that. And we're gonna add another property, set default on insert, and it will be true. This property will add the default properties to our document, and I guess that's it. And if I just console log the blog bulk update array, you can see we have an array of objects. The filter is an object and the update is also an object. Okay, so now we are really going to update our data to the database. So we need to import the blog model. So import blog from mongoose/models/blog, and we need to call the bulk write method from the blog object. So blog.bulk write, and we need to pass the blog bulk update array. And also it is an asynchronous process, so we need to await that. And now let's just refresh the page. And now let's go to the database. Let's go to browse collections. And you can see that in the blogs database, we have a new collection called blogs. And here we have the document. We have the custom ID, all text, then the content. We also have a created add property, which is equals to a date given by Mongoose. And also we have the total views, which is equals to 0. And now if I refresh the page again, we should not have duplicate documents. And if I refresh, you can see we still have only one document. And now I'm just going to add some real markdown file with blog content in the blogs directory, and also some images in the public directory. Alright, so I have added 4 markdown files with blog content in the blogs directory. If I open up one of this, you can see that we have the same type of data. We have the metadata, title, description, custom ID. Then we have some markdown content. And you also might have noticed that I have used a custom ID, but I have commented out. Later I will uncomment it. So that's the content for our blog. And also in the public directory, then the blogs directory, I have added multiple directories for each of these blogs, and they have a file, banner.png, an image file. Okay, so that's our blog contents. And I will go to the browser and I will refresh this page to add the data to our database. Okay, so we don't have any error. And let's go to the database. And you can see we have a blogs collection again. And here we have 4 blog documents. So everything is working fine. I will close this file for now. And also I will delete the console log. Now that we have the logic to add data to our database, now we need to fetch data from the database. We're gonna fetch 2 times. First, we're gonna fetch the top viewed blogs, and then we're gonna fetch the recent blogs. So const top blogs result will be equals to await, and we need to call the find method from the blog object, or you can say the model, and the first argument will be a filter object. Now we don't want to filter anything, so we are going to pass an empty object, and then you can pass another argument, which is the projection. You can pass either a string or an object. It is totally optional. Basically, with projection, you can include or exclude any kind of field from a document. So I'm going to create another object, const project. I want to exclude some fields. I don't want the underscore ID, and the value will be 0. That means I want to exclude that field. If you want to include a field, then you have to pass 1. Then I don't want the underscore v, and also I don't want the content. And this will return you a result, and we need to sort that result. We can do that with method chaining thanks to Mongoose. So dot sort, and we're gonna pass a string, and the value will be a field name, which is total views. Now I want to sort it in descending order. If you want to sort it in ascending order, you will pass just the field name. If you want to sort it in descending order, you have to pass a negative sign. And we only want the top 10 blocks, so we need to limit the result. So call the limit method, and I'm going to create a variable const limit, which will be 10, and I will pass limit here. So these methods will return you an array of objects. So I'm going to console log it, top blocks result. So let's see what we have. And on the console we have an array of objects, you can see. And now I want to get the recent blocks result, so I will copy this and I will paste it again. This time it will be recent blocks result. Everything will be same, but in the sort method we're gonna change the field name. The field name will be created at, and if I just console log the recent blocks, and you can see we have an array of object. And now we need to return these data as prop, but we cannot do that right now. We need to return JSON data as props, but these are not valid JSON. Here's why. A valid JSON data doesn't contain date, and in these objects we have this date. So we need to convert it to a date string, and then we can pass them as props. So I will loop over the top blocks result. So const top blogs result dot map, and we will get the blog. These objects that you are seeing actually not a normal object. These are Mongoose object. You cannot change them. To change them, we have to call a toObject method on this blog. So const blog object, then blog.toObject, and now we need to change the created at field. So blog object dot created at will be equals to blog object dot created at, and we need to convert it to a date string, so to date string. And finally we're gonna return the blog object, so return blog object, and I'll do the same thing for the recent blogs. I'll change it to recent blogs, and I will loop over recent blogs. And now let's console log them. I'll just console log the top blogs, and we have again array of objects, but this time we don't have any date object, we have a date string. So now we can pass this data as props. So I will delete this, and I will pass top blogs and recent blogs. And also I will delete this console log, and let's go to the component, and our home component will get these props. So we will destructure it. So top blogs and recent blogs. Again, I will console log to see if it works or not. So top blogs. And now we have an array of objects printed out, and they are the same objects. Now we can use this data to fill up our blog preview cards. So I will delete this line, and we will pass some props to this blog preview list. First, we're gonna pass a header prop, and the header prop will be top blogs. Then we're gonna pass our blogs prop and blogs, and it will be top blogs. And I'll copy this, and this time it will be recent blogs, and the blogs prop will be recent blogs. Recent blogs. So now let's open up the blog preview list file, and we will get those props. I will destructure them. So header and blogs, and here in the heading I'm gonna use the header prop, and instead of looping over a dummy array, we're gonna loop over the blogs. So blogs, and our callback function will have a blog parameter, and I'm gonna spread out the blogs. Let's open up the blog preview card. And also this component will get multiple props, so I'm gonna just paste the destructured code. So these are the props that we are going to get. So I'm gonna create a link variable, const link, because the slug is just a slug, it is not a complete link. We need a complete link. So I'm gonna use template string. The link will be /blogs / the slug. And now in the image, we're gonna remove the source and add our banner. And also for the alt, we're gonna pass alt text. And here on the heading, we're gonna pass the title, and the link, the href, will be the link variable. And now we need to change this text with created at date, total views number, and the reading time. Actually, it will be total views, then the views word, and this one will be the description, and the href will be the link variable. And I guess that will do the work. So let's save the file. We have an error. Image is missing required src property. I did pass the src prop. It should work. Let's go to blog preview list. We have destructured the header, blogs. We have done everything. We have looped over the blogs. We have got the blog. Oops. I have destructured the blogs array, not the blog object. So I have to remove the S. And now it should work. Alright, so now it is working. We have the banner, we have the title, description. And if I hover over it, the link is different. It will take me to another route, which doesn't exist. So I'm not going to click it. And everything is working fine. Okay. And this page is also static. And we can also build our application. So let's try that out. I will kill the server and just type yarn build to build the application. And you can see Nextjs has built our application, and we can run the server with yarn start. And let's just refresh the page. And you can see it was super fast because it is a static page. Everything was built at the build time. The getStaticProps function of the index.js file was ran only at the build time. But if you are working on development, then the getStaticProps function will run every time you refresh the page. Okay, so we have successfully made our homepage static. Now, before I end this video, I would like to mention one quick thing. After recording all of the videos for the series, I realized that you don't need to create a custom ID field on your documents. You can simply just pass your own custom underscore ID in your document. To do that, just go to the blog markdown file and instead of custom ID, replace with underscore ID. Both of the technique will work fine, but I have recorded all of my videos, so I'm gonna use custom ID field for rest of the video series. I hope you understand. So if the video has been helpful for you, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.